Thanks, Maggie. I have to say it's a great honor to be here, and in particular to kick off this session. I wanted to start out and talk a little bit about a quest that I've been on over the last few years. It's a quest to locate a mysterious creature. We've heard that creature referred to a little bit over the last day or so. That creature is a consumer who's engaged in the kind of healthcare decision-making we've been talking about. I probably imagine a few of you have been on a similar quest. And this creature is mysterious in part because we don't know what to call this creature. So some of us refer to this creature as a patient, others as a member, some as a user or a participant. So we have different names for this creature. It's kind of like that parable of the elephant and the three blind men, and how they all see the elephant for what they can directly touch and experience. It also puts me in mind of another parallel, which is where this image comes from, which is the symbol of a white elephant in Indian culture. I don't know how many of you are familiar with what a white elephant represents, but it's got this dual kind of meaning. One is the incredible good fortune of discovering a white elephant because it's so rare, but the other is the obligation that comes with it. You have to take care of it. And generally, that costs a significant amount more than the good fortune that comes from having it. And I tend to think about, and I know my clients do, the people I find, the white elephants I find, as very much falling into that category. They're precious, but they leave you with a burden. They're someone you keep taking care of. So I'm going to start out and introduce you to a few of these people, and then broaden some themes from there. So this woman's name is Debbie, and she lives in Leander, Texas. And I was fortunate in 2006 to get hired to do a study of people on high-deductible health plans. And not just anyone, but we were studying people with low incomes on these health plans. How many of you have really looked at that group? It's an interesting group, and in many ways, I still think it's kind of the leading edge of decision-making. And that has a lot to do with money. We haven't talked that much about money here. But at this point, if you're going to talk about health and behavior and decision-making, you better be talking to people about money. So Debbie manages three different health plans for her family of three. Her husband has a PPO at work. She has a high-deductible health plans for herself. And then her son, young son, has severe allergies. So she has a separate plan for him. So we spent a lot of time looking and talking to her about how she makes decisions. And this gives you some picture on it, on the process she goes through, the people she needs to talk to. You'll be comforted to know that the doctor is in here somewhere. But what's interesting is that most of the people she talks to, and the people she talks to first, are people in which there's an exchange of information. They're either in her physical network in Texas or online, but either way, she gets information from them, but she also answers their questions. There's an exchange there. And that's the basis of her trust, and that doesn't exist with healthcare professionals. She's going to get information, but she's not giving information. She's not helping them. So that's one of the insights that come from talking to these people. I'm going to now take you on the subject of trust to a very different part of the world. This is South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal. So this is the hardest hit part of the world in terms of HIV and TB. And I had the pleasure of working with a group of young South African men over a 6-month period to look at their involvement with the healthcare system. Now, these are not white elephants by a long shot. These people are not engaged at all. In fact, they were completely absent. And we were working on a range of mobile interventions, which I'll talk about later. But these guys were nowhere. And so we really decided to focus on them. How do we get them engaged? And it turns out that we were kind of wrong about what we thought the barrier was. We thought the barrier was fear, given the level of prevalence of these diseases. And it wasn't. It was pride. And once we engaged them and got them to participate in working with us and shaping a solution, they got incredibly invested in that solution because it was the first time they'd had a chance to shape any of the experiences around them. So their pride kicked in, and they followed us on this journey, and along the way, most of them found their status out for the first time after being at the center of this epidemic for 5 years. So participation here was critical. I'm going to now switch kind of modes here. We've talked a lot about social networks, online social networks. Some really amazing statistics of what's happening there, but what's the face of that engagement? We've been studying support groups online for the last 6 months, and I'm going to introduce you to Liz Marie. So this is the one real identity, this person you can go and find today. She's a very active participant in a diabetes group on Facebook, and she plays a very special role. She's kind of the ambassador. When anyone joins this group, she greets them immediately with a warm message. And she does this over and over every day. There are thousands and thousands of people in this group. And it's a very important function because one of the drawbacks of social networks, and one of the interesting things that comes out of that limitation, is that they have very short memory spans. There's no archive of information. You can't search on the discussions that have happened here. So you need people like this to refresh the memory. And by greeting people, she's reaffirming the values and the mission of this group. And by answering their questions, which are the same questions every week or two, she's refreshing that knowledge base and reaffirming for everybody why they're there. It's a very important function, and one where you need someone who's really invested not just in supporting people, but in the culture of that community. Here's the last one, and this is a girl who's up in Minneapolis. Her name is Jen. But we found her by the handle Prior Fat Girl on Twitter. And she and her friends, Fat Little Legs and Cupcake Love, are all telling an incredible story. So they're not just here to make sure people make better decisions. They're reinventing themselves. They have an identity and a story they're telling about who they are, and it's transformational for them. It goes way beyond the 100 pounds that she lost. And she's now organizing events where she gets fat girls together in her town to talk about it. So these are the faces of engagement, right? And these are the themes, and they're themes I'm sure you're nodding your head that we've heard over the last couple of days a lot. Themes around engagement and feedback and reciprocity and culture and community and emotion. But what does engagement actually look like? I bet this is not what you were expecting. So we have this image in our head, and we've heard this over and over for the last day or two as well, of people in lunch lines looking at their choices and getting very engaged in a decision, or people at the doctor's office, or people in the gym trying to decide whether to go to the gym. And anyway, we have this idea that these moments of decision where people are going to really lock in. And the fact is, this is engagement. And I study it a lot, not just in healthcare, but primarily for clients in media communications. And I watch the way in which people's engagement with sharing and fun and play is growing exponentially across gender, across age groups. I see it every morning on the subway commute from Brooklyn. Half the people are playing games on some device. And I'm not just talking about kids. I'm talking about people who got on in Bensonhurst and Bay Ridge, got on in Crown Heights, all over town. So the challenge here, right, is not that different to the Happy Meal. It's not easier to compete with this than it's not easier to compete with this than the French fries and the hamburger. Gratification is immediate. It's the FedEx principle that we heard about yesterday. So this is the rhythm of engagement. And so when my customers and clients talk to me about how to build engagement around the knowledge they have in healthcare and how to engage consumers, I start to think about, well, how do you engage engaged consumers, people who are already so engaged with information and sharing and connection? We talked also yesterday about feedback loops, and the challenge for healthcare is that your feedback loops are relatively extended. And these feedback loops are immediate and instant. It's not just about giving people information. It's about understanding and adapting. You're not going to set the pace of these kind of conversations. You have to understand how to adapt to them. Now, this seems like a pretty daunting challenge, and frankly, it is. But I wanted to broaden kind of the footprint of our discussion a little bit, because you're not alone. So this is some work we've done in the space of energy. So energy is opening up around the world, particularly in the European Union, where providers can jump on the grid and offer services just like a mobile network provider like Virgin Mobile. And they're facing the same challenge. How do we get people involved in this kind of decision making? This is an example from transportation. This is the EcoDrive from one of our clients, Fiat. Allows you to look at your performance on a day-to-day basis in your car, both in terms of the footprint of it and just the general performance of it. One more example, Mint. You're probably all familiar with Mint. Do you notice any similarity between these examples, by the way? So when I look at these, I'm always reminded of those print ads from the turn of the century, old newspapers, Victorian ads, the age of electrical appliances, right? An appliance in your home to solve every need, health needs, cleanliness, food, you name it. And I kind of feel like if you substitute the word electrical appliance for bar graph, you're seeing the same phenomenon, right? A desire to show information and make information meaningful. So we're at early stages, and I think these attempts are relatively crude, but the idea is right. It's about sustained behavior change. And no one is delivering that message better than Tim Brown, who probably speaks better than anybody for kind of the design world and the mission of design today. I see it every day in my studio with new designers who come and join Frog, or mid-career designers who come up to me. 5 years ago, they would have said, I want to get on that next project to design the iPod or the coolest device for Samsung. And today, this is what they're interested in. And it's a huge opportunity. And it's an opportunity not just for healthcare, but for design. It's an opportunity that is forcing us to change our engagement model a bit. So I wanted to kind of switch the tables a little bit and not talk about how design can change healthcare, but how healthcare is changing design and changing it at least within our firm and a lot of the firms that I talk to. And I'm going to go through a couple of categories. I'm going to go through them very fast since I'm probably already out of time. But I would love to talk to you about them in more detail after the session. So starting with partnerships, broad, growing awareness of the power of partnerships. Returning to South Africa for a minute, so we launched a mobile initiative there called Project Masaluleke 3 years ago. It's one of the largest mobile initiatives on record. And here's what's interesting about it. All right, it has some of the typical partners. There's a clinical partner who's operating out of one of the largest hospitals in Edendale, affiliated with MGH. And these people are there on the front lines, engaged with communities in outreach. It also has development partners like you'd imagine, technology partners, local mobile developers in that environment. But it has some other partners. We've created a relationship with the second largest mobile operator. They're donating between 1 and 2 million messages a day to carry AIDS information and HIV information that we're putting on the network. And that's free. As a side note, if you wanted to buy that, if you wanted to reach 10% a day of the lower income population in South Africa, the most important economy in the African continent, for an entire year, it would cost you about $250,000. We got it for free, thank God, because we didn't have $250,000. But that's one of the partners. Another partner who you're seeing on the lower right is the largest independent hip-hop label in the country. So we're working together. These are actually some pictures from a video Skype to map out a set of initiatives and bring these together. And a lot of the glue has been an incredible organization called PopTech, which organizes a conference like this. If you haven't been there, it's really fantastic. But it's bringing together unique partners, not what you would expect in the public health space. Here's another example, a little bit closer to home. This is something that was organized by Bill Drentel, who's out here somewhere. Bill? I don't see you. I hope you're out there somewhere. So Bill put together a design summit, and I was fortunate to run a work group that was focused on healthy aging. And I had Nick from Mayo. There's this little beautiful little face. And some brilliant designers, CDC, AARP, and another brilliant guy who's funded by Robert Woods Johnson. And we put together a program for engaging people when they hit 50 in some simple health measures. So there's a huge kind of gap in adoption of these measures between 50 and 60. So we had some of the usual suspects, the dream team that you'd want, CDC, AARP, and Mayo, et cetera. But the other interesting thing is we had 4 different design firms, leading design firms, Frog, Design Continuum, et cetera, at the table. And we've continued to work on it. We've got a grant from RWJ. And we're continuing to work together. So we're actually collaborating together, which I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's actually quite rare in the design community that you can bring design firms together like this. So we're excited about it, not just for its potential to impact that issue, but as a model, a collaboration model that we don't see a lot. All right, I'm going to speed up a little bit. Investment. Sometimes partnerships are not enough, and we invest in developing technology because it's our only way to see and understand behavior, to really get at the heart of the matter. This is a project we did funded by the Italian government, an EU grant, building a prototype of a bandage, smart bandage, and connecting that to a mobile device, and looking at the experience cardiology patients have when they leave that hospital and they've lost that link to all of this monitoring equipment, and they're very fearful of what could happen. So in order to get at that experience, we created some elements of it, but our goal was to get to the IP around the behavior, around the experience and how it should work. This is another example, something we're launching with a media partner in January. And it's essentially a social game that drives behavior change on Facebook and on mobile devices. The next one, which is, I think, the most radical, is seeing design firms embrace open networks. This is really not in our culture. Our culture is to preserve ideas as proprietary to clients or as proprietary to our presumed brilliance. We launched this platform this summer. It's called Frog Mob, and it's a way to crowdsource research. We can take a snapshot of experiences around the world from our studios, our friends and family, and our broader social network on a range of topics. And in a week, have a picture, have stories, have hundreds of pictures that tell a story about something, right? It's a kind of crowdsourced research that we could never do otherwise. This last example comes from just a couple days ago, a team of frogs participating in a health hackathon in California. And in 7 hours, building a prototype for an app called Healthy Commute. The last thing I want to talk about is probably the most important, and that's education. So there's a huge interest in the design community, and particularly in design young designers, for ways to engage in these topics, and education is really critical. We're seeing this in programs, and these programs are all blossoming up in universities around the country, programs in social innovation and social impact at design schools. And they're all looking for partners. They're all looking for people to collaborate with. And it's a huge opportunity in your local market, wherever you are, whether it's in the Midwest, in California, you name it. There are huge opportunities to build engagement, both to impact immediate problems and to set the course of careers. So I wanted to close with another quote from Mr. Brown. I don't think he's here yet, but I know he's deeply invested in the innovation culture here at Mayo. And I think it sums it up pretty well. We're seeing a redirection in design, and we need help. We need help figuring out how we can apply our talents, not just to the needs of a single client, but to broader needs that I think we all care a lot about. And so I wanted to close with one thought, which is that we came here to talk about how to transform health and healthcare. But I would be awfully disappointed if we didn't find a way to transform design at the same time. Thank you.